let's get to what's going on in Israel, because obviously the situation is developing and it will have obvious global consequences. But beyond the global consequences, if you only care about like American domestic politics, this is going to be very important for American domestic politics as well, because Israel, even though they didn't officially technically take credit for it, Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh, for those of you who don't know,
assassination of
is the Politburo chief of Hamas. He is not the military commander. He is not a part of the Hamas military wing at all. He is the politics chief, the political bureau chief, okay? As in the main guy who was a part of the negotiations process, the guy who was free to travel from Qatar to Turkey to also Tehran. He was in Tehran for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. The new Iranian president, which, by the way, ran on a reform line as well, or significantly more reformist than prior leadership. And he was there in the midst of the ceasefire talks that he has been engaging in. The way that you need to understand it is like he is basically like a diplomat, and his job and his responsibility in this circumstance is the facilitation of the ceasefire negotiations. Now, the Israeli occupying force had already killed his family, like slaughtered his family completely. Children, grandchildren. I think it was either his like sister's whole family too. Like his extended family was all wiped out already, which is, of course, you know, that's expected. I mean, come on. They're in Gaza. Of course, they're going to get killed. That was already expected barbaric behavior from Israel, regardless. By the way, Hezbollah had not confirmed whether or not Fuad Shakur, the Hezbollah top military commander, had been killed until 2 hours ago. They finally confirmed it in the strike in Beirut that occurred yesterday. Israel's been going after top generals and top administration leaders, including obviously militant leaders involved in militancy within the resistance groups against Israel and America in the region. There was another person that they killed as well earlier today, but assassinating Ismail Haniyeh is a entirely different equation. And I think people don't fully comprehend it, especially because most people don't know how this works. Most people don't understand what Ismail Haniyeh's job was. And most people are unfortunately deluded on this issue because mainstream media just puts a boatload of false information under the auspices of like impartial coverage. Unless you've been following this stuff closely, watching my broadcast, you're going to be a little bit confused about what is going on. It's really for two reasons. One, Ismail Haniyeh is the, chief negotiator in the hostage negotiations deal in the midst of this like ceasefire demand that the United States government is making, right? That's number one. Why the would you kill the main negotiator out of nowhere? He's a civilian. He's not associated with the military wing regardless. That's number one. Number two, this happened on Iranian soil in the capital. So it's another major escalation from Israel. Now, Israel has killed Iranian nuclear scientists on Iranian soil on a regular basis. But this is akin to like killing a top diplomat, a top foreign diplomat in the midst of negotiations on Iranian soil, which is obviously a little bit different than just like murking nuclear scientists with assassinations, which they do on a regular basis, right? Like I said.
Haniyeh was leading ceasefire and hostage release negotiations for Hamas and was widely seen as more moderate and pragmatic than Hamas's military leaders who, after nearly 10 months of brutal warfare, continued to battle Israeli forces in Gaza. The fear now is those talks could be completely abandoned.
Yeah, that's the major issue here, is that there's obviously always going to be internal conflict within any organization. There's internal conflict within, the Knesset in Israel, right? And Yahya Sinwar is seen as obviously he's the military faction leader. So Yahya Sinwar is seen as like a significantly less moderate figure in terms of the Palestinian resistance than Ismail Haniyeh is. After all, he's the one who's literally negotiating the ceasefire deals. So assassinating the moderate guy who's talking to you about the ceasefire negotiations is the most insane thing you can do. If You want to do the ceasefire deal to begin with and release the hostages to begin with. But they don't want that. Israel has never wanted that, especially Benjamin Netanyahu does not want that. Are you sad Hamas leader is dead? Brick dumb chaser. I'm sad that the Israeli hostages are not returning home. I'm sad that the Palestinian hostages are not returning home. I'm sad that there is no ceasefire in sight. I'm sad that our brutal, violent, barbaric attack dog in the Middle East is completely unleashed and doing whatever the fuck they want to do and escalating tensions with the hopes that daddy, the United States of America, American soldiers, American military men and women will go and defend Israel when they do this kind of shit and get retaliation. The IDF didn't technically claim responsibility, even though they did. They did the same thing because they can't help themselves. They're fascists, right? What do we know about fascists? Fascists can never help themselves. They have to flex. So what did the IDF do? On their Facebook account, they posted a photo immediately after the assassination of, they posted a photo of Ismail Haniyeh with the words, target eliminated. Then they deleted it. But of course, everybody saw it. U.S. officials already claimed it was Israel anyway. Of course, everybody knows it's Israel. What are we talking about? Now, why the are we in the suicide pact when the obvious situation here is reining in the attack dog by telling him no more weapons? That's it. That's all you need to do. Like, you just have to say, if you're America in this circumstance, all you have to do is say, hey, you don't want to do this ceasefire that we presented, that we keep repping, that we keep actually pointing to as a good deal, that people are finally asking, demanding in the Western world even. Okay, no more weapons. That's it. It ends tomorrow. It ends yesterday. It could have ended on October 8th if America wanted it to end on October 8th. That's the reality. Iran is going to send another volley of missiles to give America and Israel a 48-hour notice. Anything short of Israel assassinating the Ayatollah on live TV will not have consequences for the state of Israel in the short term. They have passed every single red line. I don't think Iran is interested in doing anything major that puts the existence of the state of Iran as it currently exists at risk. Yeah, Iran said that they will respond, that they will retaliate, but everything that they've done thus far, whether it was after Qasem Soleimani's assassination, which was also illegal and insane, or whether it be after Israel bombed the consulate, it has always been incredibly restrained. Incredibly restrained. So restrained that even Western media has considered it to be restrained. Think about that. Okay? They have no business ever giving Iran any kind of positive coverage whatsoever. I think we should look at Lebanon as a far more serious situation. Hezbollah may now use its precision missiles on Israel after its top military leader was assassinated in broad daylight in the middle of Beirut. And Beirut was always the red line for Hezbollah. Civilians were also killed in the strike. The real possibility of war is with Lebanon, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, I think that is a very real consideration. But also, Iran's retaliation now. Iran says that they might retaliate, or they've okayed a retaliation. So obviously, that's three fronts all of a sudden. You have Gaza, you have Hezbollah in the north, and you have Iran everywhere. You then also have the Yemen retaliation that is very much real as well. Yemen literally bombed a Israeli neighborhood with a fucking drone, with like a bathtub drone. That was insane. That's like previously unheard of shit. Where the is your air defenses? The other side of this story is that Israel only responds to violence, as in Israel only responds positively to violence, positively by their enemies, right? Israel only backs down when they actually see some kind of significant harm to their population. They respond with extra violence when it's obviously an enemy that they consider to be a weak enemy that they can punish by destroying every matter of civil life in the Gaza Strip. But they backed away from further escalations when Iran sent in a ton of drones, including showcasing that they are capable of striking inside of Israel, military bases and whatnot. Hezbollah did a similar move when they showed drone footage. Israel also had to back away from their invasion of Lebanon when Hezbollah pushed them out. This is a terrifying lesson to teach the entire resistance group in the region. Like, you're basically telling everybody, we'll murder your children if we find you to be a weak foe. But if you actually show us that there will be consequences for our actions, then we'll back away. That's what they're teaching everybody. They're like, no diplomacy with us. We're rabid. You cannot negotiate with us. We will do everything in our power to keep killing you, especially if we perceive you to be weak. And now they've destroyed the fucking ceasefire talks entirely. Here is what Secretary of State Antony Blinken had to say.
Hania was involved in ceasefire talks in Gaza. What impact is his death going to have?
Well, of course, I've seen the reports, and what I can tell you is this. First, this is something we were not aware of or involved.
Great, man. Thank you. Once again, reiterating that, like, I was asleep on the wheel. Israel is dog walking us. They do whatever the they want. Like, even if it's not true, even if it's literally not true, because Benjamin Netanyahu was in America like last week. What are we talking about, right? Like, they had no conversations about what the next steps are. Even if it is not true, and they were absolutely aware of this, which I think they must have some inclination that it was going to happen. Why the are you saying that Israel gets to do whatever the it wants? You're just showing weakness again. Anyone at this point that still tries to maintain the position that, like, Israel is always looking for a partner in peace but can't find it is the most delusional person on the planet. Do I fault them for being this delusional? No, because every aspect of the media is covering it as though it's Hamas that's like f***ing up the bag, f***ing up the deal over and over again. But it has always been Israel, and it will continue to be Israel. And if you can't see it, I don't know what to tell you. You're in the midst of a hostage negotiation. America wants you to do the hostage negotiation. The entirety of the Western world wants you to do the hostage negotiation. International organs of justice have declared you to be a war criminal, your leadership. The International Criminal Justice Court has declared Israel to be an apartheid. Everyone is basically saying exactly what's going on. And Americans are just going, la, 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 can't hear you, can't hear you. They had a pro-rape protest like this 2 days ago. That's what Israel's worried about. How much rape can their soldiers do on Palestinians that they've detained? That's their top priority right now. The fact that we are going in 10 toes down on this like genocidal apartheid regime in this like weird suicide pact is insane. That sounds fake. Yeah, of course it sounds fake because it's like unimaginably cruel. It sounds utterly psychotic, except if you watch my last video on it, Israel just had its own January 6th moment.
Let's get to this.
You will see where I talked about it. This 60-minute video will go through all of the details of why the Knesset held an emergency meeting where Benjamin Netanyahu's own Likud party Knesset member actively said, yes, shoving a metal rod in the ass of a detained Palestinian.
לרקטום של בן אדם, זה לגיטימי?
כן, אם הוא נוח'בה, הכל לגיטימי לעשות לו. הכל. הכל.
In the Sdei Teiman facility, which was covered for months at this point by even Western media for having like horrific acts of rape be conducted, a concentration camp that is not actually for Hamas militants, but simply people suspected of being Hamas militants, a concentration camp where they release 40% of the detained Palestinians in a matter of weeks after raping and torturing them, by the way. That concentration camp had 9 of the jailers get arrested by the Israeli government. What did the Israeli public do? They went to the fucking prison and the military courts and tried to personally release the fucking 9 detained soldiers. Now, why did Israel try to actually do some justice here in this one specific instance? It's because they are under investigation by international organs of justice, and they want to avoid getting penalized for it and actually getting punished for it. They want to use the principle of complementarity, the idea that there's due process inside of Israel for war crimes, therefore no international organ of justice can interfere in their affairs, as a mechanism, as a shield. That's why they wanted to do it. That's why they arrested the 9 people. They detained them. Okay. They were released some of them were released, by the way. Iranian media reporting that an Iranian military advisor was killed in Beirut also. Milad Bedi, one of Iran's military advisors in Lebanon, was martyred in last night's attack by Zionist regime fighters in Tahrir. He was settled in the vicinity of Hajj Mohsen Shakar building, and his body was identified a few hours ago. Yeah, this was a older post from Vincent Bevins. In the final years of the South African apartheid, the white government decided it must, 1, overthrow the government of Angola, 2, install a puppet regime in Namibia. 3, attack Zimbabwe. 4, attack Botswana. 5, attack Zambia in order to survive. This did not work. They are going through the exact steps that every prior white supremacist fascist government has gone through. It is a damn near identical circumstance to Nazi Germany. It is a damn near identical circumstance to apartheid South Africa. And Israel has been given a wonderful exit ramp from the resilient Palestinian people to have a South African apartheid ending, which it refuses to do so. And it seems like it will have a Nazi Germany ending instead. The only difference in this dynamic is that America is unconditionally riding with Israel.
Just explain a little further where you believe and what you mean by this analysis in terms of Netanyahu and his political calculations at this point.
I think, first of all, we have to recognize that Netanyahu in particular has been pushing for a war between the United States and Iran for more than 15 years. He's done so using the nuclear program. On a couple of occasions, he was actually quite close. The strategy has been to start the war himself and then drag the U.S. into it. This may have been one of his best chances yet to do so. So it is completely in line with everything else that he's done for the last 15 or so years. Moreover, we know very well that Netanyahu has been the main obstacle for a ceasefire deal. In the Israeli media, it's openly discussed how he actually has been leaking intelligence in order to sabotage the talks. He's being accused by the family members of the hostages, by his own officials, by military officials of being the obstacle. And he's done so for a very simple reason. The minute this war ends, his political career ends and his prison sentence likely will begin, given the corruption charges against him. So prolonging the war has always been a case. Undermining the ceasefire negotiations has been the case. And what is more effective in killing the ceasefire talks than actually killing the person on the other side of the negotiating table? And then you have the Kamala Harris aspect of this. Kamala Harris's body language, her tone, the rhetoric clearly indicated that there will be some form of a shift. How substantive it will be, we don't know, but some form of a shift away from what Biden's approach to Netanyahu, which has been quite differential. But by escalating matters in this way that he has now done, potentially even getting a regional war, he will essentially force Kamala Harris into the same bear hug as Biden voluntarily adopted after October 7th, and will take the initiative away from Kamala Harris in case she becomes president, rather than and forcing her to react to events rather than actually being able to take initiatives of her own.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, this is really bad. If there is an escalation and the United States is brought in to a regional conflict in a much more meaningful capacity in terms of like American soldiers, that's precisely what Benjamin Netanyahu wants. Giving him what he wants is not only devastating for the globe, devastating for oil prices in general, devastating for the global economy in general, but it's over at that point. It's game over. From a simple American election cycle standpoint, this right here, from just simply the conversation, if we're going to look at it in the narrowest way possible, looking at it as like Biden versus Donald Trump, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. If this leads to the Biden administration going to war on behalf of Israel, it's the most jover it has ever been for Kamala Harris. It's the most jover for not only just like Israel, it's the most jover for America. It's just miserable. 2 points that I've reiterated this election cycle from the start is, one, this is the most boring election cycle so far, but it has the capacity to become the most interesting one. We're already there. It has become the most interesting election cycle so far. The other thing that I keep reiterating is an age-old adage from American elections in general. Foreign policy is never top of mind for Americans until it is the only thing for Americans. Vietnam is an example of this. Israel could make this the exact equation. Hania was a terrorist. We should be happy he's gone. If Putin got killed, nobody would be sad. Dude, what are you talking about? Hania is not the equivalent to Putin in this situation. He's not even the equivalent to Zelensky in this situation. He's the guy who is negotiating the ceasefire. What the fuck are you talking about? Putin is comparable to Netanyahu in this equation. No matter how hard liberals and Republicans try not to see that reality, the equivalence here is Putin being Netanyahu, not Ismail Haniyeh.
I will just note one more thing, Becky. We've heard for weeks, you and I have talked endlessly about the ceasefire deal and U.S. officials putting the onus on Hamas, saying the ball is in Hamas's court. They have stopped saying that. In fact, it appears that the ball has switched into Israel's court.
It was always in Israel's court. It's just media always likes to play catch up. Like months later, they're like, oh, well, I guess the Sderot Haman concentration camp is kind of up. 6 months after the original investigative reporting that comes from Israeli investigative reporters. For the past 3 months, we've said that Hamas is actually ruining the fucking peace deals, but and the ceasefire, but maybe it was actually Israel. The ball's on Israel's court. U.S. prepares to counter Iranian attacks on Israel within days, U.S. officials say. U.S. officials say they expect any Iranian retaliation to be from the same playbook as their April 13th attack on Israel, but potentially larger in scope. And it could be also to involve the Lebanese Hezbollah. A senior Israeli official said the Israeli intelligence community expects Iran will launch a wide-ranging missile attack on Israel. Yes, new details emerge on the Ismail Haniyeh assassination. It was a bomb that was smuggled into the guest room that the IRGC literally, in a building that the IRGC straight up controlled 2 months prior, knowing full well that that's where Ismail Haniyeh stays when he visits Tehran. Kind of crazy.
As the political face of Hamas, Haniyeh was also the man sitting in the same room as the Israelis trying to hammer out a hostage deal. That could now be in jeopardy.
When you kill the person you negotiate with, what is the intention? The intention is to kill any possibility for peace.
Today marks 300 days of Hamas captivity for hostages in Gaza.
That's crazy. I hate this framing. Oh, 300 days of Hamas captivity. How about 300 days of genocide too? You know, come on. You can't bring up the fucking hostages unless you're going to talk about how Israel has no interest whatsoever in releasing the fucking hostages. Why do you care that the leader of a terrorist organization was assassinated? Number one, Israel is a significantly larger terror organization than Hamas. They are significantly better at doing terror in comparison to Hamas. Hamas are like not even baby terrorists in comparison to what Israel has done. That's number one. Number two, the person that Israel assassinated was the principal negotiator in a ceasefire deal that would see the release of 150 Israeli, some of which are American, citizens. Well, most of them are IDF soldiers at this point, but are prisoners of war and hostages that Hamas has captured for 300 days. You don't do that. You just don't kill the principal negotiator, especially when he is the chief of the Politburo and is not affiliated with the military wing. He's also seen as a more moderate figure within the Palestinian liberation, within especially the structure of Hamas. So that's what it is. It's one thing to assassinate Haniyeh. It's another to do it specifically in Tehran. It's genuinely hard to imagine, let alone put in the words the seriousness of what comes next. Yeah, I mean, that's what I thought too, but I think Iran, they're like relying on Iran not wanting the smoke. Nasrallah also spoke today. Seems a pretty serious response also coming from them in addition to Iran. This is from Timur Azari, Iraq bureau chief of Reuters. Hassan Nasrallah, general secretary of Hezbollah, the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon, has said he noted that Israel hit a civilian building in the capital suburbs, killing civilians and a top leader. This indicates Hezbollah could strike at or near a major Israeli city, going for a mixed military/civilian target. Do I think Iran has the capacity to take on Israel? Bro, there is no taking on Israel. Taking on Israel means taking on the United States of America. But ultimately, I think America and the rest of the Western world have a lot more to lose in a situation like that. What do I mean by this? Israel benefits from being a steadfast ally and firmly within the ecosystem that the West has created. Imperial core countries have a lot to lose in any kind of destabilization. You say that like the U.S. never lost a war? No, they have. That's what I'm beginning to explain. Imperial core countries live a life of luxury in comparison to the global South. If there is a war with Iran, Iran wouldn't just target Israel. They would target, by way of their resistance groups that they have planted strategically, that, you know, came out of allegiances that they have cut together with, you know, even Sunni groups like Hamas or the Ansar Allah administration in Yemen, allegiances that they've created, and numerous groups in both Syria and Iraq, that they could immediately start targeting oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. All of America's allies in the region, all the Gulf states, would be at risk. Things would get really frustrating for people in America very quickly. It wouldn't just be like, oh, this is a war far away, who gives a shit, whatever. Maybe some American service members die in the process, but we can just kind of not talk about that, like in Afghanistan. It would turn into a complete collapse of the global economy as a consequence of oil prices skyrocketing. There would be a genuine global economic crisis, specifically because the price of a barrel of oil would shoot up so much. Surely Iran isn't crazy enough to take on the entire Gulf in the West. I think that's part of the reason why they're not responding in kind, but instead responding in a very restrained way so far. But yes, I mean, this would be global war, full blown. It's something that I don't think China wants. It's something that I don't think anybody else wants. It's something that I think is so severe that Benjamin Netanyahu thinks he can get away with opening up a second front and potentially a third front and pull America in and keep this limited. But let me tell you, you would not enjoy this at all. None of us would, which is why I've been saying since early October that America has to restrain Israel. Yeah, U.S. can't defend Israel plus every oil field in the Middle East at the same time. I mean, I don't think even the Iron Dome itself, no matter how hard the American defenses try to stop like a full-blown Iranian missile strike with Hezbollah and with Yemen, there's just no way. That would be a shit ton of people dying. In Israel, one death in America is worth so much more in the eyes of Americans than like hundreds of Iranians dying. Even in terms of the calculation, like when you were born in Yemen and all you've known your whole life is genocide and famine as a consequence of Western-backed forces with Saudi Arabia and UAE conducting a man-made famine and creating a genocide in your country, when 100 of your friends die, that's like every other day. That's something that you have experienced in your life. But when you're living in Israel and you're like a marketing executive and you go and you eat your pizza palace and you go and you eat at the pizza palace and you play the shittiest techno music of all time, you're like living a normal life in luxury for the most part. When one person in your country dies, that is something significantly more dramatic because it's like out of the norm. America's geopolitical condition, like its position on the planet, sheltered it from the worst aspects of World War II because it was so far away. That's why 9/11 was so goddamn significant. It's like, holy shit, 3,000 Americans died on American soil with a foreign-born attack. That was unimaginable. For people in Iraq, that's like, you know, a combination of, you know, maybe a week of America's most intense bombing. For people in Afghanistan, it's the same. Maybe not to the same number, but like over the course of years and years of occupation that America engaged in these countries, they're significantly more used to it. Do you trust the missile story or the bomb story? I trust the bomb story. This question is the bomb story and gives a reason as to why. The Iranian intelligence is insisting on an air-to-surface missile is responsible for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. The leaks coming from Israel want to establish that a bomb was planted. Israel's want to portray the attack as an intelligence operation to keep it under the category of shadow war, but Iran seems to have decided to deal with the attack as military aggression. Oh. Wait, that also means that, like, Iran wants to retaliate. Iran posted their red flag of vengeance. So did Hezbollah, by the way. As in, they have both vowed to take action. Axios reported a few hours ago that U.S. intelligence believes that Iran is preparing for April-style missile attack, and U.S. forces are mobilizing the same as well. Do Americans really want another war in the sandbox, though? A lot of Americans and Westerners are having more of an isolationist stance. I mean, it doesn't matter what Americans want. Chatters, what you want is completely insignificant, especially when it comes to foreign policy. There's no better representation of this than our undying loyalty, seemingly, to the state of Israel, no matter how aggressive, how violent, and how ridiculous Israel gets with its belligerent actions in the region. This is the readout of the conversation that took place where they discussed with Netanyahu the U.S. efforts to support Israel's defense against threats, including against ballistic missiles. This is, in my opinion, consistently teaching Israel the wrong lessons. Like telling them over and over again that, yeah, you can do whatever the fuck you want, and we are going to defend you. Like, we're going to defend you from the consequences. When you keep telling them, like, oh, yeah, no, we're going to defend you no matter what. We're going to defend you no matter what. Every time you fuck up, every time you keep increasing the pressure, like, then, yeah, of course they're going to keep doing it. President Biden spoke today with the Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. The president reaffirmed his commitment to Israel's security against all threats from Iran, including his proxy terrorist groups Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. The president discussed efforts to support Israel's defense against threats, including against ballistic missiles and drones, to include new defensive U.S. military deployments. Together with his commitment to Israel's defense, the president stressed the importance of ongoing efforts to de-escalate broader tensions in the region. Vice President Harris also joined the call. If you want to de-escalate at this point, you got to be like, you're all on your own, dog. I wasn't there. I didn't kill Ismail Haniyeh. I've been telling you over and over again that you should do a ceasefire deal. You're actually up the bag for my party's reelection. You're on your own, big dog. That's what America should say. Cut off military aid, and Israel will very quickly change tune. What is this? The VP landed in Atlanta and told the traveling press pool, Israel has the right to defend itself, adding, in particular against a terrorist organization, which is exactly what Hezbollah is. She empathized. We still must work on a diplomatic solution to end the war. Did anyone ask her about how the nuclear-armed country we have pledged unconditionally give our most advanced weapon systems forever is in an active pro-rape insurrection supported by several members of the Knesset? Would that not be a relevant thing to ask? I think so. I suppose the counter thought to that threatening arms cutoff will stop Israel is that it would make them go even more hog wild if they have nothing to lose while they still have weapons. Yeah, but they don't have. See, the beauty of threatening to cut Israel's arms, the beauty of that entire process is that because they are so fucking belligerent and have not stopped with their endless bombing campaign, they don't exactly have a solid backlog of weapons. It's not like they're sitting on a massive pile or a surplus. They are fully dependent. This entire thing also is on the verge of collapse regardless, because the Israeli economy is tanking. A ton of Israeli people have fled the country. Northern Israel, all of these people that live there have had to leave northern Israel. The Israeli port has had a severe decrease of traffic and trade in general. They are literally losing everything. It's not propping up their economy at all. If they were a country like Russia or a country like the United States of America that have their own arms that they're manufacturing and using, it would be a self-feeding cycle. You don't think so? No, I know it's not the case. Because they're not a fucking weapons producer. They do like obviously surveillance tech. They do a bunch of like different shit. They produce weapons as well, but not to the same degree as like the United States or especially the type of weapons that we're talking about. Like we're talking about missiles, right? Russia and the United States, when there's a war going on, can prop up their own economy because they have a war economy. They have industry. For reference, they were minus 19% in quarter 4, 2023. USA was plus 3.2 in the same quarter. Also, the irony is like we play a big role in paying their military as well, which makes me even more annoyed. The region is on the this is what Trita Parsi says from the Quincy Institute. The region is on the verge of a war that Netanyahu has triggered, a war that is designed to suck the U.S. into it. And this is all Biden had to say to Netanyahu. Oh, we got to de-escalate tensions. They're asleep on the fucking wheel, dude. Here, this is from July 18th. Israelis leaving the country permanently spiked 285% after October 7, but stabilized since. Haaretz reports 1 in 4 Israeli Jews would leave Israel to another country if they could. New survey finds. Nearly half of Israel's Arab citizens say they would emigrate if given the practical opportunity, according to the latest monthly survey by the Jewish... Arab citizens. But then it says 1 in 4 Israeli Jews. Oh, half of Israel's Arab population would say they'd leave. A quarter of Israel's Jewish population would say they'd leave. Yo, Israel's the safest place for Jews, though, bro. Without Israel, there would be no safe place, dude. I mean, I know there's Israeli Jews in this chat that are desperately trying to leave. It makes sense. I mean, it especially makes sense for these guys in here because, you know, they're surrounded by the most hostile anti-communist freaks you can get. But Israel's desperate to replace Palestinian farmhands. Newly arrived Indian workers say abuse is common. Is satisfied that the world is forever going to be changed for the worse because of one stupid pig can't let go of power? It's not just one stupid pig that can't let go of power. because obviously there's a lot of appetite for destruction. There's straightforward demands for death and destruction from the Israeli population. So it's not necessarily just one person's fault, but one person is like the most responsible. But let's make no mistake, there's a big chunk of the Israeli population that doesn't recognize the danger that is coming their way, the collapse that is so inevitable that you can taste it. One thing that Israeli Jews that are really fucking aggro about continuing this genocide don't actually factor into their calculation, even though 1/4 of Israeli Jews want to leave Israel if given the opportunity, is that this is also spiking anti-Semitism everywhere. Like definitely in the global south, but certainly in the Western world as well, because of the way that Israel has packaged this death and destruction under the auspices of like protecting Judaism as this monolithic force that is completely aligned, and the media playing a dangerous game, also repeating that line and consistently deploying the anti-Semitism accusations to anyone that dare declare that what Israel is doing is wrong, especially avoiding the coverage of all of those people who are Jewish themselves, who are anti-Zionists, who are out there in the streets. Like all that shit is so dangerous in terms of like anti-Semitism skyrocketing in this fucking country and in all of the countries in the Western world. It's not like we had a handle on anti-Semitism pre-October 7th. Yeah, exactly. Like anti-Semitism has always been there because it is at the heart of fascist thinking, right? And it kind of stems from the liberal attitudes that people have. It's anti-materialist. What do I mean by this? People love good, bad narratives. Some people are good, some people are bad. There's always a war being waged between good and evil. That's not the truth. People are products of their circumstances. People are directly impacted by their own material conditions. And the constant push and pull leads people into doing bad things, leads people into doing good things, what you would consider to be good or bad. However, liberals don't believe that because they're anti-materialists. So they believe some people are good, some people are bad. This is a major weakness that can easily be exploited by fascists, because ultimately, if you think some people are bad, that's going to lead you into consistently trying to find an outgroup that is bad. That is just fascism. Fascism is ultranationalism. It's ultranationalism attached to an intractable, unchangeable trait. It can be your race, it can be nationality, it can be religion, but it's basically something that is like there's a broadly defined outgroup and then there's a broadly defined in-group. That's just what fascism is. And it works so perfectly within the confines of liberal thinking. What do I mean by this? Everyone always ends up saying, well, there's one group of shadowy figures that have always been the villain in society. Who's that group? Jews. After all, they're responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. After all, time and time again, whenever there's like famine, who's to blame? The Jews. That's what has always happened throughout history. And the Nazis basically serialized that shit. They took it especially from the Russians originally, Tsarist Russia, and they streamlined it. So that's why liberal ways of thinking, like good, bad dynamics like this, almost always lend itself so perfectly to who the bad guys are. Well, it must be this group of individuals. They're very successful after all, despite all of the shortcomings that they've experienced. Like, that's how you create anti-Semitic sentiment. That's how you push anti-Semitic sentiment. And when Israel is doing actual cartoon villain shit on a daily basis, and like dumb Americans that watch the TV see the cartoon villain shit sometimes on TikTok, and then when they turn on CNN and CNN is like, the Jewish state is the most, the most moral state you've ever seen. When they see their politicians clap for Benjamin Netanyahu like a bunch of goddamn trained SEALs, they're like, well, what the fuck? I guess Jews do have some kind of weird mind control over the American Congress and the media. That is literally just Jews control the media. That's the narrative. That is what anti-Semites believe. A lot of people do not recognize that, like, they are feeding into this anti-Semitic sentiment when, they don't cover what is going on accurately. And when they constantly say, like when the president comes out and says, Israel's a Jewish state, I'm a Zionist, I love Zionism, Zionism is the best, and that without Israel, no Jew would be safe on the planet. When you're the American president and there's literally more Jews living in the United States of America at any given point than Israel, what the do you mean? Like, how can you say such a stupid thing? That is how right-wingers will, one, weaponize anti-Semitism, use the media coverage, and basically massage that narrative, not to one that is materialist and not to one that dictates like, hey, it's actually not like some secret hypnosis power that Jews have collectively, or that Jewish people have the power of mind control, or they control the media, or anything like that. But instead, it's America's State Department interest. It's also Christian, evangelical Christianity that dictates that like Armageddon will happen if Jews control Israel, and that creates a big base of support within the Republican Party. Like, people don't understand it. People legitimately don't understand why the we're giving unlimited, unconditional support to Israel. That's a perfectly valid question to ask. For many people who are not going to engage in this critically and go, well, Israel is an unsinkable aircraft carrier with its own espionage facilities in a resource-rich region, and that's why it's one of our most valuable allies on the planet. People don't want to think like that. That's too complicated for them. So they think in their minds, oh, it's because Jews control American government and American media. That's a much easier narrative to align with. That's a much easier narrative to understand.